that our business is built on. It's basically four pillars. We work with large enterprises in co-creating corporate accelerators, corporate innovation labs, corporate venture capital programs, and the likes. The second one is markets. We ourselves operate market access programs, both inbound and outbound, to India and from India. So some of the countries that we work closely with are Canada, UK, Australia. We ourselves have an office in Tanzania in East Africa where we are currently running a program. We work a fair bit in Southeast Asia, particularly in the ASEAN bloc. So a good amount of market access programs, especially for companies which have expanded in their domestic markets and are looking at getting into international shores. So structured programs which allow or create a kind of a pathway for companies to enter international markets. The third one is funding. So still we are a couple of quarters away, but when we started out, the bigger picture that we had in mind was running accelerator programs, market access programs, entrepreneurship programs is all fine. But the rubber meets the road, or the tire hits the road only when you're able to write checks and invest in companies, and that's how you can add real value. So we are looking at putting together an early stage fund that would essentially invest in B2B software, enterprise technology, pretty much sector agnostic as far as industries go. So that is still a couple of quarters away, but hopefully before end of this year, we should start making some early ticket investments. The fourth and the last vertical of our business is advisory stroke services, under which we operate our own brand of programs. These are essentially boot camps, accelerator programs. We own a couple of events and conference properties. So all of that comes under advisory and services. So we run thematic programs. So GrowthX WE Sprint is one of them. We started out last year, but just before that, we also did something called Growthx Bootcamp, which was largely focused on B2B SaaS kind of companies and more of an accelerated program for companies which are pretty much into decent revenues and are looking at bringing about a structured sales driven model. There's another program that we operate called Torque, under which it's more of a sales enablement program, essentially targeting companies that are doing at least $500,000 in revenue, annualized revenues. And over a period of 3 months, how can we get them across to 25 net new customers? So it's more of I wouldn't call it an accelerator. It is more of a customer development program. Likewise, youth is a significant target audience for us. We run three programs focused on youth entrepreneurs, typically folks who are in the 18 to 23 age bracket and looking at building their first venture. They might have an idea but not knowing how to go about it. So three different programs that we operate. One called Future 50, which is our own program. There is one that we operate in conjunction with Startup India and Schulich School of Business from York University, a program called Together 2021, and another one with a French design school by the name Ecole Intuit Lab, which has a campus in Mumbai. We run a program for them called Kettle. So a whole bunch of programs focused on youth entrepreneurs as well. A couple of events and conference properties, like I said, one focused on fintech and one focusing on AI. A week from now, we are also launching a year-long fintech initiative called Fintech Open Innovation, which is basically for bringing together different stakeholders of the fintech ecosystem in India. And it's a year-round program with about 35 different touch points for enabling interactions and engagements between fintech startups, incumbents from the banking financial services industry, and so on and so forth. So that's briefly about who we are, what we do. So different touch points, different angles to what we do, but essentially startups are at the core of everything that we do. Different pillars that we connect into, but again, everything that centers around startups. So we work closely with founders, with entrepreneurs, and that's who we are, and that's in our DNA. So thank you so much. I'll hand it over back to Kanish.
Thank you so much, Ajay. Uh, Now, to begin with, I would like to share my screen and give you a brief about GrowthX WE Sprint. Sure. So GrowthX WE Sprint is a accelerator program focused on women entrepreneurs, open to all entrepreneurs across the globe. The accelerator program is spread across 13 weeks for founders from India and emerging markets in Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa, with offerings from industry leaders, domain experts, successful founders, investors. We help them establish industry connections, international networks, peer community, and more. So this is the base of the program. Uh, the program is specifically designed and spread across 13 weeks and with 2 to 3 live sessions per week across one-on-one mentorships, workshops, and sessions. We do real-time feedbacks, speed dating with mentors and investors. But these are not limited to. We do weekly routine checkup with all the founders where they need specific helps on. Post the program, we do a 3 months follow up with the founders where we can kind of help them. We already have 20 plus mentors onboarded for the program who will be engaging with the cohort. Uh, uh, so we have kind of created 6 broad focused areas to begin with, building blocks where we kind of understand the problem statements they are trying to solve and help them redefine their business model and identify the gaps. Next is to identify the profile of the customers. We help them differentiate between enterprise SaaS or define their customer profile. Uh, uh, Next is technology and legal. So there are a lot of founders who get stuck between the legalities required to kind of be there in their business. So we help them with legalities of fundraising, stock incentives for their employees. We also help them with the technology portion as well, like the scalability of the architecture right in the early stage of their business. Uh, Next is process checklist. We help them across internal process checklist, help them refine their content, how to engage with different stakeholders, building their market and content strategy. Uh, this is the fourth portion. Next pillar is the sales playbook. We help them with different frameworks of sales, identify their sales models and how to scale their sales team, uh, help them negotiating a deals, define KPIs. And the final one is GrowthX. Here we help them with different growth hacks, go-to-market strategies, internal and external tips for sales and fundraising and getting pitch ready. So these are the 6 pillars that we operate GrowthX WE Sprint on. So you might be wondering why should we join GrowthX WE Sprint? There are a number of accelerators out there. Since this is specifically catered to women entrepreneurs, and here are some offerings that we are putting together. So it's a 3 weeks very focused program, helping founders to kind of focus on their business, well as being part of the accelerator program, not spending much time here, uh, keeping focus on their core business as well. We under opportunities they can say scale their products services, get access to corporate partners, industry experts, and government organizations. We have industry experts to provide them tailored mentorships, get access to not only the vSprint alumni, but across our portfolio and engage with different founders and see where they can kind of see value. Get access to startup Réseau conferences and event properties like Fintech, the Mumbai AI Summit. These are a couple of the largest conference properties that we own, and you get direct access as a attendee, or maybe even get access to speak at this large conferences. We also host investor demo day right after the 3 months program. You get direct introductions to early stage investors, access to VCs. You even get access to different markets. If you are looking to focus on a dedicated market you already have identified, we can help you establish connections there. And we end the program by a demo day. This one is only open to investors who are looking to invest in startups. So this is what the timelines look like. We open the applications today, and it's open for next 50 days. We'll be announcing the cohort on 12th of June, and the very next day, 13th, the program starts with a closure on 9th of September with an investor demo day. So here are the few mentors who have confirmed for the program. It's a mix of mentors who have built successful ventures, are part of corporates at a very leadership position, uh, successful founders, investors. It's a mix of all. Uh, Here's a glimpse of our first cohort from various domains, right from fintech, edtech, bioscience, healthcare, and much more. We had 15 startups for our first cohort. Uh, there are some testimonials from the founders of our first cohort who found it useful, and a bit about startup Réseau. I think Ajay has already shared a light on this, but yeah, so startup Réseau, uh, 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 the startup Réseau's founding team, Ajay and Shweta, are been in the ecosystem for a decade now, and they have built a lot of top meta accelerators across India and geographies, and has been part of many different founders' journey so far, and continuing to do so. And these are the four pillars that we operate on, which are broadly highlighted earlier. And here is the link to our application form. If you can add value to your venture, the apply now. We'll be sending out links via mails as well, and you can just scan the barcode now if you feel it's the right time to apply. And here's our team: uh, me, my colleague Abhay, Ajay, and Shweta throughout the support. And yeah, that's it. Ajay,
That's that's
anything?
that's that's the GrowthX team. So that's not team
Yeah.
startup Reso. So the team startup
Yes.
Reso is slightly bigger than that.
Yes.
But yeah, I'd just like to add to what Ganesh mentioned and ran through the deck. Uh, the the program is fairly hands-on. So it would have been great if you would have just gotten a couple of alumni from the previous cohort to come and speak, or maybe we can just ask them to kind of give a shout out on any of our handles to talk about what their experiences have been and share it with folks who are present here today. It's a very hands-on program in the sense that every founder's journey is very different. Just having a programmatic structure where you're having those sessions and workshops, that's all fine. But if you're having a very heterogeneous mix of founders in a cohort, and you're talking 15 entrepreneurs building different companies, coming from different backgrounds, having different journeys. I think everyone requires a very personalized kind of, whether you call it attention, personalized kind of feedback, personalized kind of, whether it is introductions, whatever it is. And that is what we try to do through the program. So the reason why we have kept the group sessions only a couple of days a week is to ensure that people can focus on building their business. So the kind of companies we pick into the program, unless and until there is a massive exception, we do not pick someone at an idea stage or where they have not gone live. So, for example, in the previous cohort, there was only one company, and the reason why they had not gone live was they had filed for a few patents, and they were waiting for some of those things to happen before they went live. The remaining ones had an average revenue of anywhere between 3 lakhs and 20 lakhs a month, and they'd been around for a minimum of a couple of years. So we typically look at companies which have identified and have a kind of product market fit. They may not have scaled up massively for a variety of reasons, but we tend to pick companies or founders who are finding it to be a little bit of a struggle. They have a great product, but they haven't kind of met what their potential is. And the objective is, think of it more as a founder development program, where we work with the founder and help them grow and get to the next level. That is the whole objective of Empower the program. The other thing is, the program itself might be a 13-week program, but our engagement as an accelerator does not limit itself to those 13 weeks. In fact, we feel that when the demo day is done at the end of 13 weeks, that is when the journey actually begins, or that is when you actually are going to require a lot of support in kind of translating a lot of the connections you might have made, the people you might have met with, the discussions you have had. So usually anyone who has been a part, and I'm not talking just about GrowthX WE Sprint, founders and startups that have been a part of any of our programs, they become a part of our alumni, our community, and we continue to engage with them on an ongoing basis. It's a lifetime kind of relationship that we try to build and help founders as they go along in their journey. Requirements might change once you're a little bit further along, but try and be the best that we can be in terms of supporting you in your journey and onwards and upwards. That is what we believe in. So
Thank you, Ajay. Uh, Next, we have a great panel who has already joined us. So we have Alifia Loharchalwala, Senior Program Officer, India, Empower. We have Sumi Gambhir, co-founder and chief experience officer at Global Linker. We have many regional directors, Southeast Asia and Oceania at We Connect International for a panel, and they would be discussing on work from anywhere, unlocking more opportunities for women entrepreneurs. And the session will be moderated by Ajay. Over to you, Ajay.
Thank you, Kanesh, for making the introduction and also introducing the wonderful panel that we have. We have Sumi, who runs a global linker. The name itself suggests what they might be doing, or what their the broader uh, operating framework is. They pretty much I think one of the so Sumi is the one who actually suggested the topic of work from anywhere. We had listed down a few topics, and we're like, yeah, that's very much bang on, because I think the last one year and plus, I think all of us from have moved on from work from home to kind of work from anywhere. But if you kind of dive in a bit deeper, I think beyond just work being a place which is shifted from office to home, I think there are a lot of pros and cons and opportunities that the work from anywhere has brought in several ways. So it was a no-brainer when we had three topics to pick one. Also, the mix of speakers that we have, or panelists that we have, is very diverse. So me being a founder, we have Minnie, who's a regional director at We Connect International, again an organization that works very closely with women entrepreneurs, a global organization, and they do a ton of things, bringing together different corporates, governments, different stakeholders, all acting as enablers for women entrepreneurs. And Alifia, who in a personal capacity is a big believer and supporter of genderless investing, and even the organization Empower that she works with, they do a fair amount of work with women, skilling women and women entrepreneurship. So great to have all three of you on this panel. So why this panel is important? A lot of people, even in the past, so before starting up startup Réseau, me and Shweta were also associated with another Meta Accelerator, a Canadian brand, Zoom Startups, running India business. And even at that time, we had kind of set up a program called Empower, uh, which is different than the organization Alifia works for. But a lot of people, when you talk about programs focusing on women entrepreneurs and stuff, there are always two sides to the coin. But there are a lot of people who might be a little bit more privileged than the others, who come up with a question like, hey, I mean, entrepreneurship is just one breed, why the need to kind of create a program for women entrepreneurs? The matter of fact is that, I mean, when you talk of women entrepreneurs getting funded, it's not that the number of women entrepreneurs is less, but if you look at the number of women entrepreneurs getting funded and kind of continuing to raise money as they go along, the number is abysmally low. It's not just an India phenomenon, it's a global one. When it comes to India, our India's population, as per UN Population Prospects 2019, 48.4% of India's population is women. But if you look at the contribution in the total workforce, only about 19.9% women, as far as 2020 data is concerned, only 19.9% women are employed in the recognized workforce. So the advancement of India's social structure has not really guaranteed the growth and inclusion of women in the economy in several ways, due to which progress of women entrepreneurs as an economic resource remains substantially untapped. And the reason why initiatives, programs, venture funds, or whatever, which are very focused on gender and to bring about gender equity of sorts. I mean, gender equity, gender equality. People kind of use all those words as synonyms, which they obviously are not. But it is very important that to arrive at some kind of parity of sorts, I think it is super critical that there are people who stick their neck out or raise their hands and creates forums and platforms to enable and change the status quo that we are in. So that brings us to this topic of work from anywhere and the opportunities that it has gone on to create for women entrepreneurs. So everyone knows that the current pandemic and the situation that we are in has hit pretty much everyone worldwide. It has hit women with job losses, closures of childcare centers, and different things and other things which probably a lot of males might not encounter. However, the surprising bright spot which is emerging is that India's 200 billion odd technology service industry, where new rules are expected to provide female workers with a broader and a more flexible kind of work environment and employment opportunities, is one. But also a lot of small businesses that have emerged during the pandemic, it kind of hopefully creates newer opportunities. So I'd like to go to Sumi from We Connect International, I mean from Global Link, and Mini from We Connect International, to elaborate a little bit on what their perspectives are around how the entire pandemic scenario has probably or has the potential to be a game changer in terms of work from anywhere, creating more opportunities for women to be gainfully employed in good roles, but also as entrepreneurs. So, Mini, if you want to go first on that.
Sure. Thank you, Ajay. So definitely, I mean, there's a ton of negatives that the pandemic brought, but one of the positives was that it did enable small and medium enterprises to scale in a way that they couldn't before because of just borders, right? So now, some of the things that we're seeing is that, especially those in the technology space, services space, where it's not restricted to like physical movement of goods, etc. There's a lot more demand from across borders, so from like Southeast Asia, from India, Vietnam, Australia. So that is an opportunity that definitely has opened up a lot more. And as somebody who works with women entrepreneurs, I think that's something that we've really been working quite extensively with corporate buyers across the world to open up those avenues. In fact, for example, we had a supplier who provides translation services, and typically that would only be open to someone in India previously, who would have said, okay, what can you do here? But in this case, we had somebody from Japan reaching out to them, from a very large MNC reaching out to them saying, okay, can you help us? We think that your work is really great. We saw it at another event, and virtual events has also given them a larger opportunity to showcase how they do the work they do. So this is definitely a positive for many of the smaller enterprises to scale beyond borders in a way that they would not have been able to before.
Great. Sumi, as a founder and who is working from anywhere right now, building Global Linker, your views on that?
Absolutely. And I must qualify for this team. I'm right now joining from New York. So that's the reason Ajay, alluded to the fact that I was very comfortable with this topic, and my team is based in India, and, we work quite flexibly. I have to say that we always did that even before the pandemic, but the pandemic has just made it easier for me to, so I don't get those questions anymore that how do you do that, because now everybody around the world is working from different locations and collaborating. So yeah, I think Mini captured it really well to say, the pandemic, and Ajay, you alluded to this as well, the pandemic has clearly had devastating effects on most of the businesses, and the ability for these businesses to employ as well. However, there are clearly some trends that have emerged, the remote and flexible working hours that have opened up, which weren't really an option for many organizations earlier. Clearly the demand for technology based solutions and the adoption for team members across the spectrum to be able to adapt to technology led solutions, and also the increased need for having access to technology based solutions at a larger scale than ever before. So if we look at all of these trends that have emerged because of the pandemic, there are two sort of things that come to my mind from here, and specifically in context of our today's discussion for women entrepreneurs as well, that this becomes quite relevant for women entrepreneurs and opens up fresh opportunities. So there are many women, and so, I mean women professionals. There were women professionals who may not have been able to work earlier because of shared responsibilities, additional responsibilities, but clearly a new sort of way of working has emerged for them. And I feel that women entrepreneurs are very good at identifying opportunities and supply gaps. So if I were to take the example of one of the women entrepreneur members on Global Linker, who was not an entrepreneur before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, she saw the opportunity of providing fresh organic farmed products and services from her farm. So she, along with her siblings, started a new venture, was able to set up an e-commerce store fairly quickly on the Global Linker solution in this case, and has opened up a startup, if we can call it that, and is doing reasonably well and employing a lot more people as well.
Nice, nice. Alifia, if you want to bring in perspectives from gender lens investing onto this whole scenario.
Sure. I feel like maybe it would be good to step back and just look at the word women entrepreneurs, because women is not a homogeneous group. And it sometimes is good to kind of break that down and understand what we mean when we say these things, because what may be relevant to a group of women entrepreneurs may not be relevant to another group. So I feel like in my day-to-day work, but also as an ideology, it's important to look at intersectionality in terms of class, caste, religion, region, their own age, and their own life cycle, etc., to understand and then curate services based on that. Because there is a certain and every time I spoke to investors in my previous life, they kept saying, "Oh, see, we have a 50% portfolio. We invest in women," but evidently, when you look a bit closely, it would be a certain section that would get more opportunities than the other, and it is the case for everything in life, right? I'm not. I mean, I understand where they're coming from, but it's good to understand our own biases when we look at supporting women entrepreneurs. So I think that would be a good starting point for me and to everyone here, including you, Ajay, and the work that you do, to look at really customizing and understanding the needs and then customizing based on what the needs are. Um, so that was one aspect. The other aspect was, I keep saying that again and again, just recognizing our own inherent biases that ourselves, everyone in the value chain, but women ourselves sometimes carry. And there is evidence to show that there is an underestimation of our own capacity of the organizations that we lead, and we kind of underpitch. There is a tendency and a risk to underpitch and undervalue the work that a lot of women do. So just bringing it up there on everyone's screen that there is research evidence towards that, and we need to decode that a little bit more. Um, the other piece in terms of looking at working from anywhere, I'm a big fan of really online work and going beyond boundaries, physical boundaries, and even time zone wise, there are different time zones that suit different people even within the same country based on what their own life is like. But also at the same time recognizing that this unlimited access and ability to work from anywhere is an idea of privilege that comes with a certain privilege. Would be good to also recognize that and see, and there's no harm in that, but also see what that means for the work that we do and in the vision that we have, especially in my own work, is to understand how do these things also end up marginalizing a certain group of people that don't have access. um, would also be good. I'm just going to throw open questions and my own my own challenges here. I don't have really answers or solutions to any of these. So that's another element that would be good to keep in mind. But having said all of these things, I feel like there is much more openness to collaborations beyond specific regions, to look at cross country work, cross region work, also to look at more and more, creating opportunities for more and more smaller startup entrepreneurs who otherwise would have not had the opportunity. So there is hope there, and would be good to tap into that hope, but also make it open that up to a larger group of people.
No, no, very valid points, Alifia, and something that we have experienced in the past. So, I mean, if I were to just narrate experiences, we used to run a program for Shell Foundation and DFID, focusing on women entrepreneurs in the energy space. And within that cohort, there was a big focus on energy as a source of input or output, and where the businesses are fundamentally created or 100% owned by women. Uh, in a cohort of about 19 startups across two different cohorts, we had at least four women entrepreneurs who were basically, they started out as self-help groups, and it had evolved into an entrepreneurial journey of an entire village, and they couldn't speak English. So whatever programs, mentors you brought in, it was almost irrelevant. So you need, and the work they were doing was probably much more phenomenal than what some of the other entrepreneurs in that group were doing. And I say phenomenal because of lack of or because of limited resources. Their access to market automatically was limited, but still that wasn't stopping them from building a successful business, which was not just one woman who was doing well for herself, but the entire village. And there were like more than 200 odd women from the village who were part of that journey, and they were all co-founders of the journey. But the challenge that we faced was to help them and Shell really liked the work that they were doing. But in order to be able to support them, the kind of mentors that we required to overcome the language barrier, and they were not digital savvy either. So the kind of support that we had to render to them and work with them was very different. It was a learning curve for ourselves. And likewise, in another cohort, we had this girl who was working on soil research, and she had come up with a technology solution for the agricultural sector. But and on the basis of application and the kind of details that she had given, we ended up selecting her. The surprising factor was when we wanted to interview her, there was a guy on the call, and we got to know that that young lady was deaf, and she had lost her voice as well. And in order to be able to communicate with her, you needed completely different skills, and to engage and help her or even understand what she wanted to say, express. The product was great, but again, as a program, you cannot generalize it. So thank you so much for bringing up those points. And even within the broader probably domain of whether when you call it gender diversity, gender inclusion, I guess you again kind of need to break it down into further silos of sort, and everyone needs to be treated differently. And how can you be relevant to everyone is a very kind of individualized kind of thing. So thank you so much for bringing it up, and we'll definitely kind of make note of it and continue to work in that direction. I'd like to go with a question now to Mini. Mini, before I get on to the question, if you can very briefly talk about the work that We Connect does, so that there's a broader context which is set in terms of the kind of vision and mission you guys have, and the work that you guys do. That will
Sure.
then lead into to the question.
Sure. So We Connect National is a global nonprofit. We work in 125 countries, and our goal is to create market access for women entrepreneurs. Specifically, we work on supplier diversity, so working with large corporations, governments, multilaterals like the UN and the World Bank to buy more and invest more in women-owned businesses. So, yeah, that's what we do in a very quick nutshell.
Thank you. So my question to you is, what are the new avenues that you're seeing which are pushing women to become entrepreneurs? And this could be both, I mean, because you also, on the other hand, work with a lot of large corporates and work on their supplier mandates where at least X percentage of their annual purchases globally need to come from women-owned businesses. There could be situations where there's a demand which gets generated basis which people are building stuff, and also generally depending on economic situations and other things. What are you finding the new avenues which are pushing women to become entrepreneurs? Tech or non-tech, doesn't matter.
I wouldn't say it's new, but the avenue that has always existed and that has been sort of amplified by the pandemic is necessity, right? Women have always had the skills that they did, and they've always tried to innovate, to find the best way to use those skills to support their families, right? So that has become one of the basic needs. And that's why many women become entrepreneurs at all levels, whether it's, like a micro enterprise or smaller enterprise, something larger, depending on how much support they get. So I would say that's one reason, but I think it's less about why they're becoming entrepreneurs and how we can help them grow, because I think that has been where the lack of opportunity has been over many years. The reason we exist is because even today, less than 1% of large procurement contracts go to women-owned businesses, which is kind of stupid in 2021. So that's why we do what we do. And so it's about how can we help them grow and scale, but also how can we create that awareness that women do this because they're qualified, because they're experienced, because they're damn good at what they do. This isn't CSR. Isn't feel sorry for these businesses. It's just damn good business, because if you're not including 50% of the businesses out there as vendors, then you are not finding the most qualified, the most innovative, the most effective, the best priced supplier for your needs. So it just boils down to that. And I think as there is more inclusivity in that, it will help many more of these organizations grow, but also encourage more women to start businesses.
Yeah, it's more about that point, which I guess needs a little bit more of I think support and frameworks and other things, which really encourages women to take it up. Because I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of bright women out there who have given up their careers to kind of bring up family and whatnot. It's not that they're not qualified, they don't have the experience, but kind of providing them with a platform that they can go ahead and kind of express themselves. and build something. I guess that's probably, I guess, a big need of the hour, so that the ones that we are losing out, and that's where probably even the entire work from anywhere kind of situation, the work from home, I think lost a lot of people that we have lost out on in the job economy. I think many of them, to bring them back, because they can, women obviously can wear more than two hats, I'm sure, to bring them back in one way or the other, and also to kind of help them kind of realize their dreams or whatever. I think there's a huge opportunity from this entire work from anywhere.
I think so, but also I would say that a lot of the businesses I work with, they started their businesses because they worked in a corporate environment that couldn't understand exactly what you just said, that they wear two hats, right? They created their own businesses because they were super experienced in what they could do, but it also gave them the flexibility to wear the additional hat. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to go to Sumi. And Sumi, before I ask you the question which is related to your business and how you're seeing how Global Linker is going about supporting women-owned SMEs, if you can talk a little bit about what you do at Global Linker.
Sure, Ajay. So Global Linker, as the name suggests, globally we are creating a community of SMEs. And the way we do this is by partnering organizations, trade bodies, and governments. And we offer them co-branded solutions where they can bring their small and medium enterprise customers onto the platform. So in India, we have got live solutions with ICICI Bank, HSBC, MasterCard. We do a fair bit of work with the Federation of Indian Export Organizations and working with them to help increase exports out of India. In Philippines, we have partnered with the Union Bank of Philippines. In Thailand, we work with the Siam Commercial Bank. And at the base of the solution, we are really creating a community of digitized SMEs with a vision that when SMEs from different organizations, different parts of the world come together, there's going to be a lot of transactional opportunities that will emerge among these SMEs as well. But the starting point for the small business owner is to be able to digitize their business with either a digital profile to start with or a digital product and services catalog with advanced capabilities of e-commerce available on the platform as well.
Great. So enabling women entrepreneurs, or probably even non-tech enabled business, to kind of reach a wider audience. So my question to you is around how are you seeing e-commerce create more of these opportunities for women, and within Global Link, what are you seeing in terms of trends, in terms of women-owned businesses that you're able to kind of bring onto the Global Linker platform, and how are you helping them kind of scale?
Sure. So I think, we've all known that for women, entrepreneurship comes quite naturally because there is an instinct to identify supply gaps. And that basically comes from the fact that women are mostly consumers and decision makers as well, in the buying decision. So, and in the past, even though women knew these supply gaps, there wasn't much infrastructure or support available for them to be able to launch ventures fairly quickly and have access to a wider market. But given everything where we are evolved in today's digital world, it's almost as easy for women to start, or anybody in fact, to start a business on a line of credit and even your credit card. All you really need is access to a solution or access to cloud services, and you can launch a business. So a lot of the observations that we have had on Global Linker are very much around that area, where it's become increasingly easy for women entrepreneurs to start and even create communities and bring those communities together. So if I were to take the example of a women entrepreneur based in Hyderabad running a 100% women employed organization, where she in her own way runs an accelerator where she trains women to stitch, make clothes, and created that community, created those products, and now sells those on an e-commerce store. So pretty much, virtually without a big infrastructure, she's able to help women contribute to their households, create employment for these women, and on the other side, provide for a supply gap as well in providing organic clothing options to women. So I think just the whole, sort of infrastructure that's now available in the digital world, it's much easier for anybody to start an enterprise than ever before. That's definitely trend number one. And trend number 2 would really be the ability to use several solutions that are available. So there is, at Global Inc, we enable them to create their e-commerce stores, the ability to plug that into a government solution, which helps them generate demand, or maybe even, using their own marketing solutions, like let's say a MailChimp or something, to be able to promote these businesses. So I think just the whole plethora of services that is available and the ecosystem that's emerging around that, that's enabling more and more women, and even otherwise, people to be able to create their own ventures and be able to sustainably run from there.
Cool. And you're seeing this more as, and I'm sure Global Linker does not operate just in India. You mentioned quite a few markets. So if you were to look at India and some of the other markets, and I'm just adding on this question, if you were to look at India and some of the other markets that you operate in, are you seeing more tendency from women coming onto the platform just in India, or it's pretty much almost neck and neck in the countries that you operate in?
I would say it's common across all. And what's also heartening to see is that a lot of government support is coming about. So very recently, we tied up with the Department of Trade in Philippines to help women entrepreneurs sell more. So what they really did was they created an online mall, for a couple of days around Women's Day, to able to be help micro enterprises from Philippines, which are women-owned micro enterprises, to be able to sell online through a DTI promoted solution. So yes, there's a lot of support that's coming from governments, corporations, trade bodies, and the trend is very much global, not just India.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sumi. I mean, yeah, it's pretty much everything is pretty much need of the hour when it comes to kind of creating an enabling platform. But I think with the current situation, I think when everyone is going digital and you're looking at more like borderless kind of businesses and borderless economies, I think platforms like Global Linker definitely just ups the ante for entrepreneurs in general, and definitely for a lot of micro, small kind of women entrepreneurs who probably now have access to a larger kind of market share than just their neighborhood. So thank you for that. Now I'll go with the next question to Alifia. Alifia, you did mention about bringing about or considering diversity even when it comes to women entrepreneurs and not just clubbing them all as one category. I'd like you to elaborate a little bit more on the from your work at Empower, your previous work, as well as someone who is pretty much into gender lens investing, in terms of the kind of support framework that you think needs to be thought about or thought of differently when it comes to supporting. Again, I would generalize as women entrepreneurs, but you can then break it down into further niches or categories like you would.
Sure. So I'm going to come from a human rights framework, and I don't want to be the party spoiler, but that's a part of my job. I mean, part of my job as an individual, not with my
Sure.
organization. But I want to kind of quote a couple of women that I interviewed for my research that I was doing on barriers that and I was looking at a particular city in Mumbai face as entrepreneurs. And again, I use the broad term, but then when I was talking to them, I was trying to understand what are the different layers that come in. Um, One is this whole assumption that women are doing this on the side, besides their kind of they are a homemaker or whatever role they are playing, and then kind of have an enterprise on the side, which their family did not understand that this was a full-time job. So one is looking at that social bias that still a lot of women, and especially when it comes to micro entrepreneurship, kind of have to carry, is that whole struggle of not only running an enterprise but also just dealing with the social biases starting from their own family to the society as a whole. Even the other piece that came up again and again and again was with funders asking them, oh, how are you going to manage this with your family and with your children if they had children? And this was not even one of the male entrepreneurs that I interviewed was asked that question about this whole balancing, so-called balancing act of how they're going to balance life. So all of this to say that the assumption that women are the multitaskers and balancers and are the ones who kind of are such super women that they do multiple things needs to be challenged, needs to be looked at as women entrepreneurs need to be looked as someone who's pitching that idea and put the gender aside. Questions such as how are you going to manage family, how are you going to balance this, etc., need to be banned, and I mean in the literal sense, because a lot of funders still feel like it's their right to ask this question. As long as a business is, as long as it is there is projection and it shows profitability and they are able to prove that they're going to break even, it's none of their business whether they're balancing married, not married, have children, don't have children. That's one piece of the of the larger problem. The other piece is also for us as a society to understand other structures that kind of play a role. So care work, unpaid care work is such a big issue that women have to carry the burden of. And again, of course, some of us are very privileged and have support system that we can individually hire, but as a society we don't really have an infrastructure that supports childcare, for instance, or even support with aging population. And unfortunately, all of this burden ends up being put on women for some reason. We really need to reflect on that. And if the other bigger question that we need to reflect on, if we kind of perpetuate that through our conversations or through our interactions with entrepreneurs. The other piece is also to challenge this whole idea of being gender neutral or being gender agnostic. I kind of get goosebumps when someone says we are gender agnostic, gender neutral. We believe everyone is equal. Because as much as you would like to be, or one would like to believe that they don't have biases, there is very inherent structures that we need to deal with. And being gender agnostic is not the solution. I think the solution lies in understanding that there's an inherent gender discrimination in the world that we live in, and then looking at how do we create enablers to overcome those discrimination. Because as much as there are lots of women entrepreneurs and women in the workforce, as a society we still have what, less than 23% of women in the labor force. And we are one of the few countries that for whom this rate is declining on a daily basis, and COVID has further made the situation, impacted it negatively. So I think let's call out the problem as problems, and only then we'll be able to build solutions, even in entrepreneurship or even in formal labor market. Because unless we really recognize the problems, we will not come up with solutions. So that's the larger issue or larger picture challenge that I want to put on everyone's frame. And also just looking at life cycle approach, because as much as we have women entrepreneurs, in my study the ones that were really able to succeed were the younger women who did not have the so-called societal responsibilities. I think as a society we also need to look at and challenge the responsibilities that men have to just take care of their own own self and not depend on their wives and mothers and sisters. I feel like these issues are not spoken about enough, and we celebrate the superwomen and we celebrate the multitaskers. But what this ends up doing for women in entrepreneurship and everywhere else is that they have to carry these double, triple burdens of running an enterprise, doing their job, but also then looking at other aspects of life. And my proposal is that in all our conversations, encourage men to take their own responsibility. And as investors, we need to question them. If I think the question needs to flip a bit, rather than expecting men entrepreneurs to dedicate their life to the business. It needs to be, we need to check whether they are kind of becoming a burden on other women in the society or not. Because I feel like there's this whole split on the spectrum, that men who give their own entire 24 hours to entrepreneurship are celebrated and are looked at as kind of icons to look up to, whereas that's exactly the problem that leads to burden on women. And the other end of the spectrum, women who have a responsibility and don't want to dedicate their whole life to business are not celebrated, and investments funders don't look at them as their propositions as good investments. And these are two different sides of the same coin. So as much as we would like to address one side of the coin, I think unless we look at the entire the other side of the problem, as what do we do to men, and do we expect of them, and how we celebrate them, and how we celebrate women differently, is an important piece of this puzzle. I'll stop there. I don't want to put more challenges. I feel like if we look at these challenges, we will probably lead to a discussion 5 years down the line where we can really celebrate success in a different way, rather than I'll just stop at that.
Thank you so much,
Alicia,
Aditya.
I have to say, I'm so excited that you said 5 years, because in my head, I feel like this is not something that I'm going to see in my lifetime, but I'm really excited that you said 5 years, and hopefully 5 years down the line, we will be able to have those conversations.
I feel like the reason I said that because we need to move away from a charitable kind of a approach where we are
Absolutely.
patronizing. It's not a favor. We are not doing, men are not doing any favor on anyone by doing their own work. Funders are not doing any favor on women by onboarding women entrepreneurs. I mean, they're onboarding businesses that make sense. But it's also important because one of the things that funders kept telling me is, oh, we don't have a good pipeline. And bloody hell, yes, you're not going to have a good pipeline because if you look at the value chain right from the age of 15, 17, 18, if women are kind of conditioned in a certain way. We don't have enough women in business schools. We don't have enough women being whose ideas are being accelerated or incubated across sectors. Of course, there are some sectors that are women heavy, but they're not as profitable and don't pay as well. So I think we need to move beyond numbers and funders trying to prove that they are very women friendly and so on and so forth. I think we really need to look at equity in the real sense across the value chain. Is my proposition, and then probably in that case 5 years down the line we may have different sets of questions to answer.
Oh, thank you, Alif. Actually, there was one project that, as a team, Ganesh, Abhay, Shweta, myself, we were working on. We tentatively titled it a calling out project, and we looked up top 50 VCs in India. And beyond just looking at portfolios of theirs, with how many women entrepreneurs they funded, we also looked at women who are at partner level, women who are associates, and women who are below. The numbers were so shambolically low that we decided not to put it out because we would get a lot of brickbats from several corners. But it was like really embarrassing to even look up that Excel sheet because lopsided is still a favorable word, I would say. So we just kept it aside. It was a good exercise to do to realize what's happening around us. But yeah, it needs to improve at several levels. It's not just about women entrepreneurs. Whether I mean, even if you look at mainstream, the kind of roles that women get and how many of them they make it up the ladder. There are many things. I mean, business schools you pointed out, STEM education you pointed out, engineering, the number of people who drop out after a few years. There's so many other things as well. So yeah, it's a big change. So, and like Mini mentioned, I guess 5 years is a very optimistic and positive view because I think it's a systemic kind of change which would require many more years. But if it happens
But
in
we
five,
will
that
have
would
to
be
break it
awesome.
down into
Yeah.
smaller pieces.
Yes.
There's no other way to go about it because
Yeah.
10 years before also I was having the same discussions, and even today I'm having the same discussions. But that's because we're looking at women as a homogeneous group. uh, I think we need to break this down into smaller pieces and look at mini solutions.
So that actually leads into the last question for this panel, and I'll begin with Alifia on this one because it kind of links to what some of the comments and statements that you made, and I'd keep this more from an entrepreneurship perspective as to why is it urgent and imminent to create, sustain, and help more women to run growth-oriented, profitable business. You rightly touched upon not to look upon it as charity, CSR, whatnot, but why is it important and urgent to create platforms that enable growth oriented and more importantly profitable businesses, and what can be done to achieve that?
I think it'll just be a missed opportunity if we don't create enabling environment and look at it from an equity lens. Again, like I said, we need to look at business schools. We need to create that supportive ecosystem, right. I mean, maybe at school level, but at least start from business school level and see how we can promote more ideations. I feel like entrepreneurship is great, but it also has huge risks involved. It has huge lopsided, um, and there is a reason why we are seeing more and more mental health issues coming up amongst entrepreneurs because sometimes they're expected to give it their all, their entire capital, their entire time, a huge part of their youth, etc. And it may not work. It could be beyond anyone's control that a success does not just lie in their work or the support they receive. There are so, like for example, COVID has such great startups have had to shut shops because this was not expected or anticipated. I feel like we really need to look at entrepreneurship as an option for everyone, not only for women, as an option, but also not expect huge success. I feel like it's kind of getting a bit dangerous when we expect entrepreneurs to put it their all and investors expecting them to be this to be their entire life. We'll see more and more women if we set our expectations right, and if we don't expect entrepreneurship to equal to life. When the risks are so high, family is not going to encourage. And especially when you look at intersections, families who do not have such high resources, families who have other issues to address, they will not be able to encourage people from not so privileged background to enter businesses. And that's why, if you look at, I'm going to just put up one more issue for us to reflect on. If you look at successful entrepreneurs, they come from a dominant caste in the country who kind of have resources to fall back on. And we need to, as a society, reflect really what are we doing that other diverse groups do not get these opportunities. Is it the same group of people getting opportunities from the same set of funders around the around the country and around the world? And if that's the case, we'll end up with, after a point, we will not have diversity, we will not have new ideas. As a country, as an economy, as a world, we are kind of leaving people behind. I don't have an answer to your question, but I feel like it's time for us to reflect.
No, thank you so much, Alivia, for that. I'll go to Mini. I mean, you did mention that even though as an organization at We Connect, you guys work with large organizations and help them with their mandate of procuring from women-owned businesses. You still mentioned that the percentage is still significantly less, and less than 1%, you said, globally. So reflecting on that, and the question that I had, I mean, what can be done, or why is it so important that we, I mean, with organizations like We Connect and several others which are around, not for profits organizations probably like ours, investors, to support and help growth oriented profitable businesses owned by women to kind of come up.
Um, I mean, I'm really actually excited to have Olivia on this call, because usually I'm the one tom-tomming the human rights angle of this. But I'll start with because there's no reason not to, right? It's whether it's women owned, whether it's male owned, whatever. We shouldn't be talking about the gender aspect of this. If a business is worthy of investment, if it's worthy of growth, then you just invest in it. You do the right thing because you help this business succeed, right? It is not CSR. Let's be very clear on that. But there's also a dollar value to it, because right now, when you look at how much we're losing by not including women, by not helping women-owned enterprises grow, that is somewhere close to about 92 billion just for one country. Yeah, that's a lot of money, and especially in the aftermath of the pandemic, when there is an economic crisis. Think of how much that can help a country, just if you acknowledge the fact that women entrepreneurs are as capable as anybody else. That's it. It's a simple choice, right? So for us, that's it. It's a business decision. You do it because it's the right thing to do, and there's no reason not to. If you want to find the most innovative, the most agile, the most effective supplier, you open it up to everybody, women, men, everybody, and you'll find that there are suppliers that you've been missing out on because you do have that gender bias. And when Alifia was talking earlier, where she said the whole thing about investors asking the question of women having the second lens, I've heard that a lot from procurement folks, where they say, oh, but we have this contract is not small, it'll be in the millions. And with a large contract like that comes a lot of responsibility. Women have so many other priorities in their life. Can they actually give my contract the attention it requires? And my thing is always, do you ask men that question? Are they not fathers? They have aged parents? You just give the contract to the right supplier, the supplier who has the capability, who has the thing, and they will figure it out from there, because they are good at what they do. And that's why they do what they do. They don't do it because it's a hobby. And that is something that we need to change, because people think women just do things as a hobby.
As funny as it sounds, but yeah, I think there's a lot of that going around because of it. Because yeah, I mean, even in the last 5-6 years that probably I've been around and working in this pretty much same space, different organizations, different names, but pretty much same work. There are a lot of companies which are started by or co-owned, co-founded by women entrepreneurs, but the numbers that you can see who have actually gone on to raise multiple rounds of funding is not that high. Not that the businesses were bad or products were bad or they were not fulfilling any needs, but obviously it does pop up that question as what could potentially be the reason. But and the answer to this, obviously there would have been biases at different levels, which probably stifle the growth at one point or the other. So Yeah, I'll just wrap up this panel because I think we have both our panelists and the moderator as well. So I'll go to Sumi with the same question to get your closing remarks on this.
Yeah, I think Minnie and Aleph have already made a lot of great points, but Ajay, just to add to that, I think urgency is also in terms of the catch up. There's a lot of catch up that needs to be done. Over the years, we have just sat on the opportunity, and it's a pity that, if I mentioned that even 10 years back, we were talking about the same issues, and here we are today. And I love that suggestion of breaking it into smaller chunks than trying to address the overall larger problem at hand. In addition to that, what I also feel is that every few years or few decades, there is a wave that comes. And with the pandemic, that wave has come, whether it's of innovation, whether it's of new businesses that are coming up. So the timing in today's sense is extremely ripe for us to, address the challenges at hand, provide more opportunities to women, whether it's professionals or entrepreneurs, because there is so much innovation that's coming about. There is so many new solutions that coming about across the spectrum. So this would really present a lot of good opportunities, and the impact of this is what we will see 10 years down the line. So that's really for me to just add.
Cool. Thank you so much for those remarks. Thank you all three of you for being wonderful panelists. Sumi, Mini, Alifia, bringing about some wonderful points. I mean, some from the question, but also perspectives that you brought about from your experiences and what you've been seeing around. So thank you so much for this wonderful panel. I'm sure that people in the audience would have liked it, and we are going to put it out in different social networks. So I'm sure that there'll be more people listening to this and sharing their views and comments. Thank you so much. I'll hand it over back to Tanesh.
Thank you, Sumi, Alifia, and Minnie to join us today. And stay around. We have another next good fireside chat coming up next. To move it, we have today Ritu Srivastava and Saili Karanchkar with us, and they'll be sharing their side of successful story on build, scale, and exit of their companies, which will be moderated by Shweta Tiwari, CEO and co-founder of Startup Réseau. Over to you, Shweta.
Tanesh. So all that we heard in the first panel, the problems, the challenges that we keep listening, right, from investment point of view, hiring point of view, managing point of view, we have two young, energetic, charismatic women entrepreneurs with us today. And both of them have been through the journey themselves. They have been around in the ecosystem, first working with corporates, working with multiple organizations, and then running their own companies. So a very warm welcome to Ritu and Saili. So Ritu, maybe we can. Thank you, Saili. So Ritu, we'll start with you. You have spent about a decade working with multiple corporates, right, from Wipro to launching your radio station with Red FM, being a radio jockey yourself, and then moving on to Obino, which was altogether a different thing. Can you help us walk through your journey?
Well, the journey has been very eclectic, so to speak. And the only governing factor in my journey, Shweta, as we've chatted about it a couple of times, has been that I tried something, I did it for a while, and then I didn't want to do it anymore. And therefore, I moved on to the next thing. So that's been a bit of a recurring theme in my life. And that's pretty much what's happened with my career as well. I started with Wipro. I was a strategic account manager there doing sales, literally selling laptops. Did that for a couple of years, did a decent job, but didn't want to do it anymore. Then became a radio jockey, did that for about 5 years. Grew up the ranks, launched a couple of stations. I left as the head of programming for Radio 1. But there came a saturation point. I think the one thing that defines a lot of entrepreneurs is a low boredom threshold. When things become routine, a lot of us just want to move on. Most of us are kind of, at least the ones I've seen, are very greenfield oriented. So I went into radio, got bored with that, quit, joined Airtel as a value-added services product manager, fell in love with product management, launched a couple of products that did really well, made a lot of money, realized that I was sitting on a potential product goldmine, not really using my brain. So quit and then started Obino. Obino, of course, came from a personal conviction. I had a beautiful little baby girl when I was at Airtel, and in the process gained crazy amounts of weight. And my journey of weight loss really presented to me the use case that I was wanting to solve with Obino, and that's how Obino happened. So yeah, that's how my journey really took place.
That's interesting. So it was a real problem that you yourself faced, and then you went out to look for a solution for the same. That's interesting. Saili, coming to you, you have spent, again, similar to Ritu, you have spent several years working with multiple corporates in your journey. And then back in 2014 is when you started your first company, which was Outsee. 2015 again when you started or co-founded your second company, which was Patience. Can you help us with your journey? What was your journey like?
Sure. Sure. Thanks, Rita. So I spent my undergrad years in Singapore, and then I worked in California and Chicago in the US for many years, all corporate jobs, and my MBA from there. But I really did want to come back and build in India. So I did move back for that reason, and also for the personal reason of family, etc. So once I moved back, I actually started building stuff that connected with my own problems. So Outsee was an aggregator of anything that is happening in the city, whether it's live music or whether it's a home cooking something interesting and happy to have a couple people over. So the smallest to the largest of events and happenings around the city, we aggregated them, and then we used some predictive data modeling to personalize them to your taste, and then we figured that out. I feel that we had like a niche audience which was very sticky, but we could not grow beyond it. And so we decided to shut the company down. For an entrepreneur, it's a very painful decision, but I think it's one of those things that needs to be celebrated more. I think we celebrate the successes, we get recognized for the successes. But especially in India, it is really not so in the US. But in India, people don't talk about their failures. People don't talk about them as learnings and even celebrate them. I think it's important to do that, and I personally did that. I still was very happy that from a corporate and a consulting type person, I could actually build something, have employees, build a team, build a product that people actually used, people who were willing to pay for. So even though it had to be shut down and we didn't make much of it, I was still happy with the whole thing. And whoever I talk to who's just starting out, I think that they have to be able to be proud of the stripes they earned, the battle scars they have earned, because all of that kind of lays the foundation for whatever is ahead in your life. So I think one of the things I would love to change in the Indian ecosystem is about celebrating failures. And I've been thinking about how to do that. Uh, but once that company was shut down, I felt that I was wrong in my thinking. I actually came from the US and started solving a problem from a first world lens. I hadn't mentally, emotionally moved to India, and I had not really understood what is going on here. And I was still kind of coming in from Chicago. So then I said, okay, let me understand problems here and experience them myself. And I'm a believer in primary research. So I actually must have talked to more than 300 people. I have more than 200 written interviews where I ask people about their key problems. And that includes everybody from chai wala, rickshaw wala, bhaji wala to the top CEOs in the country, especially of anybody digital. So anybody building digital anything, I was trying to talk to them. And all of this exercise took me a good 4 months, but it really brought me to India in every way possible, mentally, physically, emotionally. I traveled a lot, met a lot of people, and talked to a lot of people. And I then figured out that the big problems in India are all around access to information and access to finance. And access to credit or access to finance is a very deep rooted problem. There is a lot of negative emotions also attached to it, of shame and guilt, having to take a loan. But it is actually one of the most liberating things for a family to be able to get an education loan or a medical loan or just an emergency loan, because it's just that one event that takes a middle class family into a poor situation and creates a lifelong list of troubles with debt. So I started to solve that from a very customer first kind of thinking. And I'm proud of that because the problems are very deep rooted. I went myself to banks, and it depends on how I dress. It depends. If I wear like sari, Mangal Sutra, bindi, then though nobody is going to offer me anything. But if I wear a suit, Western suit, maybe something, you know, and everything in between, a whole range of biased treatments. But data is not biased, right? So data will react to whoever you are without looking at your face or your bindi. And it makes a big difference. So I set out to build that. I found a great partner in Prashant, who comes from a tech and risk background. And together we built PaySense, which was all about giving affordable loans to people from middle class or even lower income segments. And we did really well over 5 years. It was something of I think one of the best experiences, where we started with a couple of people and we grew to almost 400, and it was a huge team. But I think we managed to keep the culture strong, and we managed to find a really good strategic buy for it. The company with PayU is doing really well. The people are doing really well. So it has been a great story. So that's me, a little longer version, but that's me. Thanks for having me on here.
No, but that's interesting. And like you said, a failed company teaches you much more or many more things than a successful company, right? Because when you are successful, everything is working positive, everything is working in the right direction. But when
Yes.
things are not running in the right direction, and the biggest, I would say, decision of shutting down a company is you're not shutting it down alone, right? You
Yeah.
have you have other people working with you, so it's other people's house also that is going to face that trouble. So that's a
Yeah.
lot that it comes along with that, and I will shortly come back to you learning more about what were the challenges that you faced and how did you overcome. But before that, Ritu, coming to you. So I know Obino, like you mentioned, was a personal problem that you realized and you started addressing it. But before that, when was it that you decided that you want to? So was this when you were working with Airtel? You decided to quit Airtel, start a company. Did you already start working a little bit more and then eventually quit the company? What was the decision then? And when you started, you are a non-tech founder yourself, right? So, what were the challenges that you faced when you initially decided to start a tech company? You're on
I'm
mute.
unmute. Actually, for me, it was a slightly it was a bit of a serendipity, if you can call it that, because I think most people in the corporate sector, when you're living a corporate life, there's a very straight linear path. You're worried about your colleagues, your boss, your next promotion, maximum jumping to a better job in the same category. So you don't really look at entrepreneurship as an option. And around 5 to 7 years ago, which is when I started Ovino, entrepreneurship wasn't really an option for women in the workspace. It was not something that most people were even aware of. So, and I wasn't either. I don't come from a business family. We come from a middle class government family with never any money to spare. So entrepreneurship was never on the table. Somebody starting business, the money to start it, these were not things that we ever talked about. But my exposure came for the first time when Airtel hosted a startup weekend. Ankur Agarwal, we all know him. He was the coordinator at that startup weekend. And that was the first time that I was exposed to the world of entrepreneurship at the age of 34. And it was an eye opener for me. It was like a peek into this amazing, fast paced, vibrant, chaotic world where literally everything depended on creating something from scratch. And it was all about who you were, who you knew, what you could do. It was immensely exciting to somebody who'd been in the corporate sector for 12 years and was going slowly crazy. So that was my first peek into the world of entrepreneurship, and as usual I got very excited and impulsive and decided to take it up. I don't think I realized, because I had zero ecosystem contacts, how tremendously challenging it is to be an entrepreneur or to do a tech startup. I don't think I had any idea of the challenges involved. Otherwise, I'm 100% sure I'd never have gone for it. Because, at the heart of it, corporate people are risk averse people. It's only when you don't know the magnitude of the risk that you're taking that you feel comfortable taking it. You're like, yeah, ho jayega. The middle of it, you realize, hey, Bhagwan, ye kya kar diya maine? So for me, that hey Bhagwan moment came a little later, but I got exposed to it at Airtel, and I was extremely excited. And Airtel had something called an entrepreneurship policy, where if you came up with an idea, they would actually foster that idea. They'd give you access to senior management. They'd kind of handhold you, and they would even be your first customers if your business interests aligned with theirs.
And this
So
was back in 2012.
this was 2012. So I was assigned the head of SCM as a mentor, and he was very kind. We continue to stay in touch all this while. I came up with a different idea at that point of time. Ubino was not my first thought to go with. And I worked on that idea. I exited Airtel with support from them under the entrepreneurship policy. And while I continued to work on the idea, I realized that it was not really a feasible idea for me to go with. And that's when the idea of Obino was on the back burner. And we launched a service which was the earliest avatar of Obino called M Diets, which were literally diet plans on SMS or USSD for Airtel. They were our first customers. They did like front page ads and everything for us. Never have been able to afford it on our own. But they really kickstarted that journey for me. And then I dipped my feet in the startup world, spoke to investors, realized that VAS was a losing proposition, that we needed to go B2C. Didn't know the first thing about building an app, figured it out, built it, launched it, no idea about growth and scaling, figured it out, scaled it, got invested in, and then finally exited. So I think it was literally a trial and error method. At that point of time, I had really no idea what I was getting into. And that's not the way I would advise a lot of people to do it now.
But I still remember, without naming one of the investors. So in 2013, when you came into our accelerator program, one of the investor who met you in one of these events in Pune, he came back and he said, you know what, I met a founder. She is not a tech founder, but she's very smart. She's worked in corporate world. She knows how to get the business up and running. I think we should take her in our cohort. And we were like, array, we are talking about mobile first, we are talking about tech entrepreneurs. She doesn't even know about technology. Like, and just because his trust on the one meeting that he had with you, and we just took you in our program, and a lot that I have learned personally through you, through your journey over the years. So I think it's been wonderful.
God bless him. My heartfelt thanks to him. I think we do place a lot of fear around the area of being non-tech founders. And I think I had huge support in my journey because of my tech co-founder, Yogesh, who's still with me. And we continue to work together, and I hope we will continue to work together. But I don't think technology is something to be scared about, which I know scares a lot of non-tech founders. But I think it's just tech is an enabler. And worst case, you can outsource it. So it's just one of the pieces.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you for sharing that. Saili, coming back to your first experience at Outsea, where you realize that this is something that you now need to move on, and the whole process that you went through of doing the market research, which we earlier in our MBA days we have learned, and as entrepreneurs we all have been through it by doing the real market research and the study. What were the challenges that you faced right in your at Outsea as well as at Patience that you would like to share with our audience today?
I think, some of the challenges come from, the customer end of it, right? So for example, when you're building and scaling, it's initially a little easier that you're in touch with the customer and you know the customer direct problems. But as you grow very fast, as the team is growing very fast, it's hard to maintain that touch. So one thing that I always remembered, because of having been on a failed startup where we thankfully were in touch with the customer, so we closed early. It was not a slow death spiral. We actually could see it and close it. I think learning from that, I always had a team to take feedback calls from all the customer. I had always developed a habit, and till my last day at Patience, I always did customer tickets myself, like customer issues myself. I was very accessible, whether on social media or on the phone, to many customers who talk to me directly. So I think staying in touch with that customer is not something that the team is also used to, especially engineering. When I did collection calls, like debt collections call, we are a lending company, so we have debt collections. So when I did that with the whole engineering team in the room, it is very difficult. Like they have not seen it before, where they are like sitting in the back and building usually, but taking them to sales events, taking them to see all this collection activity, etc., was something that helped them build better. So I think customer focus as a culture is difficult to build, but if you do manage to build it right, then it pays off big time, because the whole team is dedicated to and is always looking at what the customer really needs.
Interesting. And since you also started both the companies, or Outsea much early, which was back in 2014, when the ecosystem in India, and this question, Ritu, I'm going to point it out as
Yeah.
well. In 2014, the ecosystem was still quite nascent, right? It was still budding. And today, when we are sitting in 2021, we are talking about the next decade that the emerging markets are going to see. It is going to be much more parallel to the Western world, where we still talk about being 50 years behind them. But the next decade, we are going to be working shoulder to shoulder with them, right? So, if you were to start a company today, what would you do differently, or what is the kind of support system that is there today and that wasn't there yesterday? Would you want to share some lights on that?
So I can start. I think earlier the Indian investor also lacked conviction. Uh, some might argue that is still the case, but I think it's not. I think the conviction was not there because we had not seen people spend in India, especially 2014, which is pre-Geo days, right? There was all kinds of problems. The app being 7 MB, I remember, was a big problem because like who's going to spend that much on data and download 7 MB app? Today, it's like nobody even questions a heavy content app or anything like that, right? So a lot of things have changed on the consumer behavior side, on the infra side, on just the data that is available, etc. But I think what's also changed is that we were also looking to follow. As you said that we were 50 years behind or 10 years, I think the number does not matter, but we were looking to follow the West or looking to follow even China for that matter, where whether it was the entrepreneur or the investor, both were looking for what are the things that are growing well there, let's build that for India, etc. And that kind of thinking was there because we were diffident ourselves. But I think now that has changed. We know that we can build for India. We know that monetization will happen in India, not for everything, but for many things. And we know what can be built here. And we know that we can also sit here and build for the world. We have that product confidence now that we can build the tech that can be successful anywhere in the world. And we don't need to think like them. We can think like us, and it will get figured out. So I think the confidence has changed due to the success we have seen, and people know how to do that, right? So I think across the board, entrepreneurs, employees, investors, everybody does not now look at that lens, right? So when we started PaySense, people used to ask, but US mein kaun si company hai? I'm like, no, we are building for India, right? We are not like something for India. We are actually just India. We are building this in India. So I think a lot of that pattern matching thinking has changed.
Interesting. No, I completely agree to that. Ritu, what's your experience been like?
Well, I'm going to have to take a slightly diverse viewpoint on this. In the recent past, ever since I exited Obino, I've also started investing on this side. I've invested in a few companies, and through that, met a lot of entrepreneurs who are working on diverse sets of problems across India. And I do get the feeling a lot of times that the ecosystem that I think exists and that I now have access to by virtue of having been around for 7 to 8 years is an extremely privileged and small circle that is not easily accessible to most of the entrepreneurs out there. On a daily basis, I get DM'd by young entrepreneurs, non-tech and tech, who built products, who have ideas, but don't know what to do next. They're all asking for mentorship. They're not even asking me for money. They're saying, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I launch my product? There seems to be a depressing lack of avenues of information for them to even take the next step. And the inevitable next step, due to this lack of information, is that they are going to put their money in, their time in, and fail, and the startup in its infancy will die. So I do think that while there is so much chatter and media coverage on the ecosystem, there are now so many more investors, so many more angels. It is still a very rarefied atmosphere with a very small set of people who know each other, who foster that validation, who have access to capital, resources, people, mentorship, accelerators, incubators. But I think it does not include the vast majority of people who are trying to get into the entrepreneurship space. So I really don't think much has changed. I think the people who've done it once know how to do it again. And if you're lucky enough to know someone and they can guide you on that journey, your path gets accelerated. But for the vast majority of people, nothing's changed.
So it's the top 5% of or the 10% of the entrepreneurs or ecosystem players who are getting all the support, and not the majority of them.
हमारा Bollywood nepotism हो रहा है. Star के बच्चों को movie मिल रही है. बाकियों को कुछ नहीं मिल रहा.
But nepotism is happening, right, in the ecosystem. And I mean, unfortunately, yes, we have come across such incidences. But I think that's a very strong point, Ritu. And being at Startup Réseau, being a startup enabler ourselves, I think either we are not doing our job well, or I think there's a huge opportunity for us to grab on in the next decade.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. So my second last question to both of you have successfully built a company, scaled it, and exited it at the end of the day. And so when you exited your company, was this something which was pre-planned? Did you start working on it on day one, or maybe 1 year before or 3 years before, saying that, you know what, next 3 years I'm going to exit myself? Or was it just, Ritu, in your words, was it a serendipity that happened?
Yeah, for me, it definitely was. I think a lot of my entrepreneurial journey and mostly my life has been a bit of the seat of my pants kind of flying. And I remember in the earliest days when we were raising investment, and I remember even hanging out with you guys when people, we would prep for answers that investors could ask us. So what are your thoughts on an exit? Yes, we are going to look at a time frame for exit, but we are not really, keen to exit. We really love this company. We can see ourselves building. It's all rubbish, because it's like interview coaching. You prepare those questions to tell the investors what you think you want to hear, because the reality of it is entrepreneurs don't know what exit means. They haven't seen it, they haven't had exposure to entrepreneurs who've had it. They don't know what it means in real terms of money coming in, stake going out, investors getting paid out first, nothing getting left for founders. It's Exit is a whole different ball game, and 99% of startups have zero idea about it. So I said all the right words about an exit, but for us it was actual serendipity, because we were struggling to raise in a market that hadn't performed. So we were in digital health, and digital health had been hugely invested in, and everybody had fabulous hopes about how it was going to perform. But the reality of the Indian market is that they did not want to pay for health. People are happy enough to talk about steaming 800 times a day during COVID, but nobody will even go and get a COVID test done or vaccinated if they can, avoid it. And that is the reality of how the health thinking in India works. It's a burning issue. When your sugar goes up to 600 and you collapse in your drawing room is when you will go and get your sugar test done. You are diabetic, your family has a history of diabetes, but you will never do anything about it. When it explodes, you will spend crazy amounts of money trying to retrieve the situation. But prevention, So the Indian digital health market was kind of imploding, and it has, I think, successfully imploded now. Yeah. And we were starting to come to that realization at that point of time when we said, let's raise a Series A. Our numbers were great, but the market itself was not looking up. And it was at that point of time that we got a phenomenal offer to exit from strategic investors. I think for us, it was a no-brainer. We said, let's go. First venture, let's just exit. We had no idea what exit still meant. And for a lot of people, they think exit, selling a company, is just like somebody gives you potloads of money and then you sail out of there with a little swagger in your walk. No, surprise, surprise. There is again 3-4 years of trauma after that that you have to deal with. So yeah, we're in that post-exit phase. But I think for me, the entrepreneurship journey, the exit journey, has all been a series of discoveries. And I really wish we had been a little better prepared for it. But yeah, so that's been my...
One of my biggest learning being with you in your journey is, if you get money today, just take it. Do not wait for, I might get a better valuation. If you don't get money tomorrow, company chalegi hi nahi aapki. So what are you going to do? You might as well take the money today, try and experiment, so that tomorrow you don't have that, gosh, if I had money, I would have done this. So you don't want that cash situation, right? So if you're getting money today, just take it. Your company without any money, without any customer, anyway has no value. You might as well take that money, take the company, or try to take the company to the next level and see where it goes. So I think that was one of my biggest learning.
I thought it was as well, especially not in the matter of an exit, but in the matter of raising investment. It was like, paisa mile to le lo. But some of the experiences that I've seen and some of the experiences that I now have, sometimes I think when your business fails and doesn't do well, it is the universe or the market telling you that this is going to die, right? This is not an idea that is going to grow and scale. And as entrepreneurs, it's difficult to show the maturity and accept that. Sometimes accepting money is just prolonging the inevitable. And then it gets so much more painful for everybody involved, including your investors and yourself, when you have to pull the plug. So sometimes as entrepreneurs, we're designed to run on hope, right? That's our fuel. Even the fumes of hope will keep us going for months. But sometimes it's better to accept if you're not able to raise money, or if you're getting money from sources that you really don't want to take it from. It's sometimes really better to reevaluate what that money will give you and whether you really want it at that terms. Because I've had experiences, and I've heard of experiences firsthand, where the money came in, but with the money came a whole host of problems that eventually killed the business anyway. So I'm kind of a little, I don't have a definite opinion on it.
Weigh the pros and cons before you shut on an opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. So, Saili, coming to you with Paysence and the PayU acquisition that y'all had last year, it was one of the I would say biggest exits that happened in the fintech ecosystem in India, right? So, what was your experience? Was this something which was planned, or it just happened?
See, it is, I think at every stage of the company, you do what is best for the company and all involved, right? So at series A or B, we always made the decision that we grow. When we were thinking about series C and raising, this opportunity also showed up along the way. And it had strategic benefits of growing along with the PayU universe and having that large pool of capital to deploy in on the debt side, right? It's not just equity that we need. We also needed a lot of debt because that's our raw material. We are a lending company. And there's a lot of product and synergies where we go together with all the PayU offerings. So I think it made sense not for just the product, but for the company, for the employees that we have to think about who are so invested in your journey along the years. So I think at every stage of the company, there has to be a decision what is the right path for the company going on forward. So at that point, when this presented itself, you have to wait against all the opportunities, and it made sense for us. But I don't think any entrepreneur necessarily starts with a plan of exit. Or at exit at which time, because if you start to plan for that, then it will be hard to build. I think what you do is you build the company, and then at every stage you evaluate what is the right options when the options present themselves, or you then go and do your best to create the optionality. But you can't start with the idea of selling it. I think that's not the way to go.
Sure, sure. No, I think that's valid. So now that brings me to my last question to both of you. So what's next? What is the next big thing that you're building? Maybe Saili will start with you.
So I've been working with I think with many dozens of actually young entrepreneurs who are starting on their own. I feel like Ritu said, I feel like there is a need for mentorship more than anything else. But I do invest in some of them as well. I do also have brought together with a couple of friends of mine a syndicate of very strong fintech people from the US market and the India market together, so that we can mentor and guide and invest in these young founders. It's a space I know well, but it's not like I haven't invested outside the fintech space, but I know that space well, so I can mentor those founders the most with my time. So that's what I've been doing. Other than that, I think time will tell. After 5 years of this, it also called for some downtime and family time, so I did that. And now I think this is growing. The mentoring and investing thing is growing on its own, and then I'll figure out something full time as well. Thanks,
Sure. But I think that's very important in the ecosystem. If today we see women investors, mentors to come forward and to help the fellow entrepreneurs. And like Ajay was mentioning, when we did that research, women in the VC space, women fund
Yeah,
managers.
it's quite bad. Ajay, if you're still there, I do not have definitive data like you did, and I would love to see that. But I call many of the VC people that I know, and I did not find that many women in the organizations that they were building. So even in the next 5 years, it's like if you don't have associates and principals right now, how are you going to have partners eventually either? So definitely, I feel like playing a part in that helps. And I think whatever I do, I will always continue to invest and mentor startups no matter what.
Sure. I think that's a great support to the ecosystem. In fact, Let's Venture came up with the data that in India there are not more than 100 women angel investors, and I think we should look at doubling, tripling that number quarter on quarter now. So I think that's a big help to the ecosystem. Ritu, coming to you, what's next? What are you working on?
Well, I'm going to be hitting the trenches soon. I can't. I think I've had enough of a timeout. I'm here to get back in the game and start playing. I'm working on a couple of ideas, but I think there has been a bit of a sea change in my approach to investment and funding this time around. With my experiences in the past. In the past, we also did not really have even the most basic kind of money to sustain a company till we got to revenues. Coming from a background with corporate, you don't have too many savings, and those savings are again linked to the family, so you didn't really have any wealth of your own that you could put into a business and give it a chance to get off the ground. Just even the basic first 20, 30, 40 lakhs to get to product market fit, I did not have access to earlier. So I think this time around, thanks to the exit, I do have some amount of money to kind of bankroll whatever we decide to work on next. So I'm just eager to kind of get back in the game and start playing.
That's
But
great, Ritu.
thank you. I think it's addictive. The whole process of building
Yeah, that it
startup
is.
is
Yeah.
very addictive.
It's very addictive. Yeah, I agree. So thank you so much, Ritu and Saidi. Sorry, it's been amazing as always chatting to both of you, and once again going through your journey. For me, it always has been inspiring and motivating. Kanish, back to you.
Thank you, Ritu and Saili, for joining us today. Great session. And we'll keep you posted on the cohort. And yeah, we'll be
Sure.
happy to have you interact with this cohort soon once we announce it in Zoom. And that's it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'll drop the application link in the chat box, and you'll hear back from us soon over an email. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye bye. Thank you for having us. Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks.